crept up my neck, a blush of pure mortification spreading across my cheeks for everyone to witness. Charlotte's words, sharp as shards of glass, had just sliced through the festive clamour of the annual Wright family reunion. We were smack dab in the middle of Durham, North Carolina Central Park, picnic blankets sprawled, kids chasing bubbles, the scent of grilling burgers thick in the humid Carolina air. Usually this day felt like a warm hug, a reminder of roots. This year, it felt like a public execution. Her voice, pitched just loud enough to carry past the laughter and the distant bluegrass band, accused me of being a lazy daydreamer who would never amount to anything more than a barista, if that. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she delivered them. A sneer twisting her lips, her eyes scanning the faces of our relatives, practically inviting them to agree. A few polite smiles faltered, some eyes dropped to their plates, others just stared. Wide and uncomfortable. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo of utter humiliation. What comes to mind now, reflecting on that gut-wrenching instant, is the way the sunlight seemed to mock me, glinting off the metal of the food trucks, illuminating my exposed vulnerability. I'm Hannah Wright, 19 years old, and up until that moment, I'd believed I was holding my own. I was balancing community college classes with my part-time gig at the daily grind, trying to figure out my next move without drowning in student loan debt. I had plans, nascent dreams, ideas forming, but in that instant, Charlotte, my mother's older sister, made them all feel ridiculous, flimsy, and completely unworthy. Every fibre in my being screamed for escape, for a hole to swallow me whole. My vision blurred around the edges, the vibrant greens of the park morphing into a watercolour smear. This wasn't just a casual family jab, it was a targeted, deliberate strike, intended to wound, to diminish, and it worked. The weight of her judgment, amplified by the silent audience, felt crushing. A peculiar kind of silence descended then, not quiet exactly, but a halt to the easy chatter, replaced by an awkward, suffocating stillness. A sense of being utterly exposed, dissected under a magnifying glass, settled over me. That moment solidified a truth I'd long suspected. Some people thrive on tearing others down, especially when they feel threatened by even the smallest flicker of someone else's potential. Charlotte had always been competitive, but this was a new level of malice, a public declaration of my perceived inadequacy. My mouth tasted like ash. All the colourful flags and cheerful music of the festival faded into a dull drone, my entire focus narrowed to the burning shame that consumed me. A lump formed in my throat, heavy and unyielding, threatening to choke off any sound. I couldn't look away from her triumphant, almost gleeful expression, nor could I find the strength to meet the sympathetic, or worse, pitying glances of the others. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the lingering echo of her contempt, leaving me adrift in a sea of unspoken judgment. A dangerous thought started to simmer, low and slow, just beneath the surface. Maybe she's right. That raw heat didn't just fade away once the noise settled. It burrowed deep, a smouldering ember beneath my skin, an insistent reminder of Charlotte's cruel pronouncements that day. What happened right there in front of everyone felt like the culmination of so many smaller slights, a lifetime of little jabs that until now I'd mostly just brushed off. Thinking about it, the way she spoke, the sneer that twisted her mouth, it all connected back to something fundamental, something about how our family tree had grown, or maybe, more accurately, how it had withered in places. My upbringing, looking back, felt less like a carefully tended garden and more like a patch of wild kudzu, just sprawling and choking out anything delicate. My mum, bless her heart, always seemed preoccupied with something just beyond reach, her attention a flickering candle in a drafty room. She was there, physically present, cooking dinner, doing laundry, but her spirit often felt elsewhere, navigating its own quiet battles. Consequently, a certain emotional distance became my default setting. We lived in Durham, North Carolina, always had, surrounded by the familiar hum of the city, yet inside our home, a strange quiet often prevailed. Growing up, I perceived Charlotte as the golden child, the one who effortlessly commanded the room, who could make my mum laugh with a flick of her wrist when I struggled to even get a smile. This wasn't a sudden realization. Rather, it was a slow, creeping understanding that settled in over years. Little things, you know, like how her school projects always got pride of place on the fridge, while mine might get a polite nod before disappearing into a pile. Or the way her stories, no matter how mundane, would draw everyone in, while my own attempts at sharing something exciting would often get interrupted or simply trail off into silence. A distinct memory surfaces from when I was maybe 10, Charlotte a few years older. We were at my grandma's house, and Grandma was trying to teach me how to knit. My fingers, all thumbs, kept tangling the yarn, making a mess of the simple stitches. Charlotte, sitting nearby, just watched for a moment, then snatched the needles. She quickly demonstrated the technique perfectly, then handed them back with a sigh, saying, "Honestly, Hannah, it's not that hard. Are you even trying?" My grandma just chuckled, a gentle sound that did nothing to alleviate the sting. That small comment lodged itself somewhere deep inside, echoing every time I struggled with something. Another instance, from when I was a teenager, maybe 15. I'd just gotten a decent score on a really tough math test, something I'd truly worked hard for. I came home, buzzing with a quiet pride, ready to share the news. Charlotte was already there, holding up a scholarship application form, her face glowing. "Guess what, Sarah? I think I'm going to apply for this full-ride scholarship to UNC." All the focus shifted instantly. My math test, my small victory, dissolved into the background, forgotten. Sarah was so proud, so animated, talking about Charlotte's bright future, her potential. I just slipped away to my room, the test paper still clutched in my hand, the joy draining out of me like water from a sieve. That's how it always seemed to be. My accomplishments, my struggles, they consistently played second fiddle to Charlotte's grander narratives. I learned to keep things to myself, to celebrate my small wins privately, or just let them pass unnoticed. This self-containment served as a shield, but it also built walls. I became proficient at navigating life in the periphery, observing rather than participating fully, especially when Charlotte was around. My presence felt tolerated, her absence felt noticed. Perhaps the most potent memory, the one that truly crystallizes the dynamic, comes from a family beach trip we took to the Outer Banks when I was 12. We were walking along the shore at dusk, the sky bleeding into a million shades of purple and orange. I found a perfect iridescent conch shell, something truly rare and beautiful. I held it up, excited, ready to show everyone. Charlotte glanced at it, then at me, her expression unreadable. She then turned to my mum and said, "Sarah, remember that huge, perfect sand dollar I found last year? This one's nice, but it's nothing compared to that." My mum just nodded, distracted, already looking ahead. I recall turning the shell over and over in my hand, its beauty suddenly diminished, its significance evaporated. I ended up tossing it back into the ocean, watching it disappear into the incoming tide, a small, beautiful thing rendered insignificant by a single casual remark. The memory of that shell, glistening for a fleeting second before sinking, still carries a peculiar ache. That searing heat, the one that had radiated from my core at the festival, didn't vanish with the summer sun. It seeped instead into the corners of our small Durham, North Carolina apartment, a chill more profound than any autumn breeze. Life in our familiar space, the one I'd always considered my sanctuary, began to feel alien. A subtle shift in the air, a whisper of discord that hadn't been there before Charlotte's public display. Our living arrangements, usually a comfortable dance of shared space and unspoken understanding, started to fray at the edges. My sister, Olivia, and I had always navigated the tight quarters of our two-bedroom apartment with an easy rhythm. Now, however, minor disruptions felt amplified. One particular afternoon stands out. I returned from my shift at the campus library, bone-weary and craving the simple solace of my own armchair. Reaching for my worn copy of The Great Gatsby, the one with the dog-eared pages and my marginalia, I found its usual spot empty. After a brief search, I located it tucked haphazardly under a stack of Olivia's textbooks on the coffee table. A sticky note from a take-out menu marking a random page in the middle of a chapter I hadn't reached yet. It was a small thing, yes, insignificant on its own. Yet a faint knot began to tighten in my stomach. It wasn't just the misplaced book. It was the casual disregard for my belongings. a pattern that seemed to be emerging. My favourite mug, the chipped one with the fading Durham, North Carolina Bulls logo, would appear in Olivia's room, unwashed. My carefully organised sketch pencils would be scattered across the kitchen counter, their precise arrangement undone. Things were shifted, borrowed without asking, returned carelessly, or not at all. Each instance, a pinprick, barely noticeable on its own, but accumulating into a quiet hum of irritation. Olivia herself seemed different. Her usual bubbly demeanour had a new, sharper edge. Conversations became oddly stilted. When I tried to talk about my day, her responses were often monosyllabic, punctuated by a quick glance at her phone. Her eyes would dart away, almost as if she couldn't quite meet mine. A strange barrier had erected itself between us, invisible but undeniably present. I remembered the way her gaze had flickered towards Charlotte at the festival, a fleeting expression I couldn't quite decipher then, but which now nagged at the back of my mind. The apartment, which had always felt like an extension of myself, began to feel foreign. I'd walk into the living room and pause, an inexplicable sense of intrusion washing over me. It was as if the very air had thickened, charged with an unarticulated tension. I found myself retreating more often to my bedroom, pulling the door shut, seeking refuge in a space that still felt unequivocally mine. Even there, I'd catch myself glancing at the door, half expecting some minor disruption, some subtle invasion of my privacy. The familiar hum of the city outside our windows, usually a comforting backdrop, now seemed to underscore the profound quiet within our walls. A feeling of unease settled in my chest, a persistent weight I couldn't shake. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me, that something fundamental had fractured between us. A realization began to solidify, chilling me to the bone. Though I couldn't yet bring myself to whisper the words aloud, Olivia had chosen a side. The lingering chill, that particular sensation from the festival, didn't stay confined to the living room. It seeped into everything, infecting even the most mundane parts of my routine. Pouring coffee each morning became an exercise in holding my breath. I'd stand by the counter, the aroma of brewing grounds filling the kitchen, but a strange weight would settle on my shoulders. My mother, Sarah, would sometimes come in, her movements quick and precise, always avoiding my gaze. We'd exchange clipped greetings, the kind that felt like a placeholder for something left unsaid, something heavy and unacknowledged. The clinking of spoons against mugs sounded amplified in the oppressive stillness. My phone, a constant companion, transformed into a source of low-grade anxiety. Scrolling through social media, every notification felt like a potential landmine. I'd hesitate before opening messages, bracing myself for imagined judgment. The vibrant feeds of my friends, their carefree posts about college life and weekend plans, seemed to highlight the muted tones of my own existence. There was a peculiar disquiet that now accompanied my walk to classes at the community college. The familiar path, the casual chatter of other students, all appeared distant, as if I were observing my life through a foggy pane of glass. My usual route, which had once brought a measure of comfort, now carried an unfamiliar prickle of unease. Our apartment, a place that had routinely offered sanctuary, now felt like an alien landscape. The vibrant colours of the throw pillows, the eclectic art prints Sarah and I had chosen, all seemed to have lost their warmth, their familiarity. The walls of my bedroom, which had witnessed countless late-night study sessions and whispered secrets, now pressed inward. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, sensing the presence of unspoken words hovering just beyond reach. The silence between Sarah and me wasn't comforting. It was a barrier, thick and impenetrable. My attempts to bridge it, to articulate the gnawing unease within me, were met with deflection. I remember one evening trying to voice my distress. "Sarah," I began, my voice wavering slightly. I haven't been feeling like myself lately. Ever since the festival, there's been this weird vibe." Sarah, stirring a pot on the stove, simply hummed, "Oh, honey, you're probably just tired. College takes a lot out of you." I persisted. "No, it's more than that. It's like after what Charlotte said, things just shifted." She paused, her back still to me. "Charlotte can be a bit much sometimes, I know. But you can't let every little thing get to you, Hannah. You're stronger than that." Her words, meant to be encouraging, landed flat, dismissing my inner turmoil as trivial. She never truly turned to face me, never met my eyes. The conversation, if you could even call it that, concluded there. The topic was dropped, buried under layers of domestic activity. My attempts to express my hurt, to seek some validation, were routinely invalidated, leaving me adrift. One night, after another dinner eaten in near-complete quiet, I found myself in the bathroom, gazing at my reflection. The girl staring back had dark circles beneath her eyes, a faint tremor in her lower lip. My hair, usually a tangle of curls, hung limp. I tried to conjure a smile, but my facial muscles wouldn't cooperate. A stifled cry caught in my throat, a small, choked sound that refused to escape fully. It was an involuntary reaction, a release of pressure that had built up for too long. I reached for my phone, fingers hovering over a text message I'd drafted a dozen times for Olivia. "Are you okay? I really miss how things used to be." Then, with a decisive press of my thumb, I deleted it. The vacant reflection in the mirror seemed to echo the hollowness I carried inside. That lingering coldness, the one that had settled in my bones after the festival, transformed into a biting frost one Tuesday afternoon. I was scrolling through an old high school group chat, the kind you never truly leave, just let go dormant. Most of the chatter there consisted of old memes or random links. A new image popped up, sent by Isabella, a girl I barely remembered, and who had never been particularly close to Charlotte. It was a screenshot, a text exchange from a different private chat. The sender was clearly Charlotte. Her words, stark and unapologetic on the screen, hit me like a physical blow. She was recounting the festival incident, not with regret, but with smug satisfaction. Charlotte had written, "Yeah, Hannah totally deserved it. She gets too big for her britches. Always acting like she's so special." Another message read, "Someone needed to humble her. It was hilarious watching her face." A jolt coursed through me, a sickening lurch in my stomach. Denial, which had been a flimsy shield for weeks, shattered instantly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an accidental slip of the tongue fueled by jealousy. This was calculated. The realization landed with the force of a wrecking ball, demolishing everything I thought I understood about that day, about Charlotte, about trust itself. My perception of her shifted, unveiling a deliberate cruelty I hadn't dared to acknowledge. A tremor started in my hands, spreading rapidly through my body until I shook uncontrollably. The air seemed to thicken, pressing down on my chest. My throat constricted, making it difficult to draw breath. An overwhelming wave of humiliation washed over me, burning hotter than any blush. This wasn't just a public insult, it was a performance, meticulously orchestrated for her amusement and the validation of an unseen audience. The sheer maliciousness of it took my breath away. A deep, visceral anger began to churn within me, an unfamiliar heat replacing the frost. It bubbled up from some primal place, a fury I hadn't known I possessed. How could someone be so deliberately unkind? How could a person derive joy from another's abject mortification? The betrayal cut deepest. I had always tried to believe in some shred of family loyalty, even from Charlotte. Now her true colours were glaringly apparent, painted in the casual cruelty of those texts. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from the intensity of the emotions swirling inside. A profound sense of disbelief rooted me to the spot. I reread the messages, searching for an alternative interpretation, a way to soften the blow, but there was none. Each word was a tiny, sharp shard, embedding itself deeper into my psyche. My entire emotional landscape began to fracture, a series of hairline cracks appearing in the foundations of my self-perception and how I viewed my place in the world. The world, which had once appeared somewhat predictable, now seemed to tilt on an unsettling axis. A significant part of me, the one that wanted to believe in inherent goodness, simply disintegrated. This was a calculated act, a cold, hard truth, and it created an irreparable rift within me. The sting of those digital words persisted, a lingering burn. Having reread the malicious exchange several times, the initial shock gradually yielded to a colder, clearer resolve. It became apparent that certain individuals in that old high school circle had continued their subtle campaign of negativity long after graduation. A contained fury began to coalesce within my chest, a sensation both unfamiliar and empowering. This new emotion, a steady warmth replacing the usual chill, signaled a significant shift in my internal landscape. It wasn't merely about feeling hurt anymore. It involved a conscious effort to sever connections that drained my spirit, connections that had, in hindsight, persistently weighed me down. One evening, scrolling through my contact list, I paused at the name associated with those hurtful messages. A decisive tap on the screen initiated the unfriend process. A wave of liberation washed over me, unexpected in its intensity. The act itself was so simple, yet its impact resonated deeply. A silent rebellion against a history of unspoken slights. A certain trepidation accompanied these initial steps. What if these individuals retaliated? What if my decision caused further social ripples? Yet, the overwhelming desire for inner peace outweighed these anxieties. I was recovering the right to decide who occupied space in my world, a fundamental autonomy I hadn't realized I'd surrendered. Closing these digital doors felt like drawing a line in the sand, a declaration of independence for my own well-being. My interactions with others subsequently underwent a subtle transformation. Where I once might have offered details about my day or my future plans without hesitation, a new discretion took hold. Information became a currency I guarded with increasing care. No longer did I volunteer personal insights to acquaintances whose true intentions remained ambiguous. This shift didn't go unnoticed. My mother, Sarah, whose observations often felt like indirect probes rather than genuine inquiries, eventually addressed my withdrawal. She approached me one afternoon as I was preparing a light meal in the kitchen, her gaze settling on me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Hannah," she started, her voice a little too casual. "You seem a bit contained lately. Everything all right? You've been different." Her inquiry, though softly spoken, caused a fleeting internal flicker of alarm. A part of me wanted to retreat, to offer a vague reassurance and dismiss her concern, to maintain the protective shell I was building. Yet, a deeper current urged honesty, or at least a firm stance. "I'm making some adjustments, Sarah," I stated, focusing intently on the chopping board, the rhythmic sound of the knife a steady counterpoint to my thoughts. "Just figuring out who deserves access to my peace of mind. Some relationships needed re-evaluation." She nodded slowly, her expression remaining neutral. "Well, that's mature, I suppose," she said, her tone lacking the warmth I craved, almost a dismissal disguised as approval. She didn't press, didn't ask what relationships, didn't offer any deeper insight or support. The conversation simply ended, leaving me with the familiar faint echo of unaddressed issues. This period, however, involved a thorough re-evaluation of nearly every association. Former acquaintances whose conversations felt like wading through quicksand found themselves slowly, subtly, phased out of my orbit. Text messages went unanswered for longer periods, or received concise, non-committal replies. Calls were sometimes screened, directed to voicemail with a newfound ease. It was a conscious withdrawal, a personal reclaiming of my boundaries, a deliberate act of self-care. This process was not without its repercussions. A different sort of tension arose from this newfound assertiveness. Not everyone welcomed the change. A few individuals, accustomed to my prior openness, and perhaps even my prior vulnerability, expressed confusion or even annoyance. Their reactions, however, only reinforced the necessity of my actions. Their attempts to pry or to guilt-trip me into old patterns were met with polite but firm resistance. Recognizing this dynamic only solidified my conviction. This wasn't about being unkind. It was about fundamental self-preservation, about protecting my mental energy from unnecessary depletion. My contained internal struggle was finally manifesting externally. My daily rhythm adapted to these new parameters, settling into a healthier cadence. Mornings began with a deliberate intention to prioritize my well-being, incorporating brief moments of reflection or a walk around the block before diving into the day's tasks. Academic pursuits gained renewed focus, offering a welcome distraction and a tangible sense of productive purpose. Even my walks around the familiar Durham, North Carolina neighborhoods carried a lighter step, a sense of inner contentment settling within me. The constant internal hum of anxiety, though never entirely absent, had significantly loosened its grip. I was learning to breathe again, unburdened by the weight of external expectations and the lingering shadows of past hurts. The culmination of this quiet revolution arrived one evening. A message popped up on my phone, a forwarded post from that old group chat, containing yet another thinly veiled jab, a passive-aggressive comment clearly aimed at me, though disguised as general banter. My finger hovered over the sender's name. A moment of hesitation, a fleeting echo of past hurt, a whisper of the old me, attempted to resurface. But it quickly dissipated, replaced by a surge of clarity. Without a shred of doubt, without a second thought, I tapped the block option. My digital world instantly became clearer, safer, finally devoid of that particular source of negativity. A profound sense of internal victory settled within me then. That small, decisive act, executed with a deliberate certainty, spoke volumes without a single uttered word, a personal declaration of independence. The chill from that festival day, the one that initially left me feeling exposed and small, has finally begun to thaw. Months have passed, bringing their own tide of quiet revelations. I've come to understand that the true weight of someone else's words isn't in their utterance, but in the space we allow them to occupy within our own minds. For a significant period, Charlotte's venomous comments had taken up residence, shaping my perception of certain gatherings and, more profoundly, my own worth. It's a strange journey, this process of reclaiming mental real estate. What comes to mind now, when I reflect on that particular summer afternoon, is not just the sting of her public dismissal, but the unexpected turn it took. The festival was a yearly tradition in Durham, a vibrant tapestry of local music, food trucks, and community booths set up on the town green. I'd been volunteering at the youth leadership booth, explaining our upcoming civic engagement projects, feeling a genuine sense of purpose. My involvement in these programs had always been a source of quiet pride, a dedication to making a tangible difference. A crowd had gathered near our display, drawn by the lively chatter and perhaps the free bookmarks we were handing out. Charlotte, who had spotted me from across the expanse of the green, decided that was her cue. She sauntered over, a smirk on her face, and without preamble began to dissect my efforts, her voice carrying just enough to ensure those nearby caught every word. "Look at Hannah," she'd sneered, her gaze sweeping over my small setup. Still playing Little Miss Perfect, trying to save the world with paper. A snicker escaped her lips, and a few people exchanged uncomfortable glances. My face flushed, a familiar heat creeping up my neck, just as it had done countless times before when her taunts found their mark. Just as the humiliation threatened to engulf me, a distinguished figure approached our booth. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed, with an air of quiet authority. His uniform, adorned with a multitude of ribbons and badges, identified him as a high-ranking military officer. He introduced himself as Colonel Davies, and his presence instantly commanded attention. His eyes, keen and direct, settled on me. He extended a hand, a warm, firm grip meeting mine. "Hannah Wright," he stated, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the residual awkwardness Charlotte had created. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard so much about your dedication to the Youth for Community Action initiative." A hush fell over the immediate vicinity. Charlotte, who had been about to launch into another scathing remark, actually faltered, her smirk dissolving into a look of startled confusion. The Colonel continued, addressing the small crowd that had now fully turned its attention to him. "This young woman," he announced, gesturing towards me with an open palm, "is the driving force behind the Operation Hometown Heroes project. She's not just a volunteer, she's our newly appointed youth liaison to the City Council, representing the voices of young people across Durham. We call her the Catalyst." The words hung in the air, transforming the energy of the space. My title. The Catalyst. It wasn't a formal rank or an official salary, but a recognition, a designation given by a respected figure, affirming the very work Charlotte had just derided. The initial mortification evaporated, replaced by a surge of something powerful and profoundly affirming. My spirit registered the shift. People around me started murmuring, some nodding in approval, a few even offering smiles of genuine admiration. Charlotte simply stood there, frozen, her face a mask of disbelief, her carefully constructed put-down utterly dismantled by a single authoritative introduction. That specific moment, with the Colonel's words echoing the truth of my commitment, taught me a fundamental lesson. True validation never truly arrives from those who seek to diminish you. It emanates from within, or from those who genuinely see and appreciate your efforts. The subsequent days and weeks saw me leaning into that realization, shedding the need for external approval like an old skin. The old group chat, the source of so much quiet anxiety, became less and less relevant. I no longer scrolled through it, searching for confirmation of my fears or validation of my existence. Today, my apartment in Durham, which had once felt foreign under the oppressive weight of Charlotte's influence, finally felt like home again. The hum of the city outside my window is a comforting presence, not a backdrop to my internal struggles. I've been doing okay, more than okay, in fact. The path to unburdening myself from the weight of others' expectations has been arduous, but undeniably worthwhile. Learning to breathe again, truly breathe without the constriction of external judgment, has been the most profound recovery. My hand reached for my phone, a familiar reflex, but instead of opening any social media app, I pressed the power button, watching the screen go dark. The quiet hum of the room filled the void.